Hi there, great to see you all. Thanks for joining me. It's just me today on the webinar, so thanks for joining. Second in our client community webinars. Great to see so many of you joining again. A little bit of housekeeping then, as it's just me on the webinar today, we'll take questions at the end if that's okay. If someone could let me know that you can hear me okay, that would also be great. Hopefully you can all hear me. But yeah, if you've got any questions as we go through the webinar, please just pop those in the questions box and we'll answer those towards the end, or attempt to. Yeah, it's just me on the webinar today. So what I'll do is I'll close down my webcam and we'll crack on with the webinar, and hopefully you'll find this of interest. Great. Okay, everyone. So, firstly, thanks. I'm glad you can hear me. Thank you for letting me know that, Neil. Okay, so, yeah, we'll have questions at the end. So let's go for it. So we're talking tracking, reporting, and ROI. And in the webinar today, we're going to be specifically looking at tracking and deciding what to track. Checking your tracking. We're going to take a little look inside in Google Analytics, look at Google Analytics settings, best practice, tracking checks, reporting, important metrics to be looking at, and the less important metrics, which might be quite enlightening for you guys. And we'll also look at Google Data Studio reporting, which is available to clients generally, that are clients of Key Principles. So, and then finally, we'll look at return on investment and how you can start to track that for your marketing campaigns. It's really important to us that we track how well we're doing for clients, and it's even more important for you guys that every pound that you spend, you want to know you're making a return on your investment. So we'll look at that as well. It's not that easy to do, but we'll look at it and we'll see if we can get as many people looking at return on investment as we can. Okay, so deciding what to track. So the best way to decide what to track is literally to go to your website and start having a look around and deciding on really what actions on your website does someone take that actually you'd really like them to be able to track that action. And there can be so many, so it's worth going through your website and identifying all of the different things that would enable you to work out when someone has performed an action that you really want to track. So examples of this include obviously form completions, contact form completions, completions on service pages, all important. Newsletter signups may be less important, but still worth knowing, and worth knowing where the newsletter sign up came from originally. Email clicks, often not as accurate in terms of tracking, because if you click on an email on a website, sometimes the person may not actually then email you, but still worth tracking. Phone calls, this one's a tricky one. If you get a lot of phone calls, then you really do want to be tracking them. There's really only one free tool that we're aware of, and that's when you're using Google Ads. Otherwise, you really need to look at call tracking, and we do have options available for our clients. I would say, if you're getting anywhere between 50% or more of your inquiries from phone calls, then you really need to be looking at call tracking to really understand what's working and what isn't in your business. And request a call back. Obviously, those are just some examples of what people might perform on your website. You might also have white paper downloads and other things that people might do that you'd want to track, but here's some examples. So if we've not set up any tracking for you as a Key Principles client, then the first thing that you can do with some homework here is to actually go to your website and start to build a list of all the different things that you think it's actually worth tracking. And then we can talk about what happens next once you've got that list together. So checking your tracking setup. there's a couple of different tools that we can use to actually check tracking. The first one is called Google Tag Assistant. It's a Chrome extension. You can download it and add it as a Chrome extension. And this allows you to view what Google tracking tags are firing on your website and identify any errors that might lead to inaccuracies in your data. So there are 4 different colors that you might see when you start looking at Google Tag Assistant. Green basically means that everything is okay and everything's working fine. Yellow means there are minor issues, such as same property being tracked twice, which could cause data to be tracked twice. Yellow usually means it's working, but the data might be inaccurate. Red means there's a critical error and the tracking may not even be working at all. And blue means improvements may help with the overall health or accuracy of the data that you're tracking. Blue doesn't actually mean your tracking isn't working. For example, when we fire Google Analytics through Google Tag Manager, which is our recommended approach, there will be a blue message come up under the analytics, as you can see here in the screenshot, that is suggesting non-standard implementation. However, the tracking is still actually working perfectly. It's almost like Google haven't got up to date with their own tracking method. And as I say, this is the method that we usually recommend for clients. So some common examples of issues found in Google Tag Manager. The biggest, probably one of the biggest actually, is where the tag is outside the head code. That in itself might not be a massive issue, but to be honest, it will limit the accuracy of your data. So it is definitely worth looking at. Basically, you need the code as high on the web page as you can, because then every action pretty much can be tracked effectively. There might be a missing closing tag. Again, that definitely would need sorting out. Those of you familiar with Google Tag Manager will know that there are 2 elements to the tracking code, so you might need to add that in. You might be using an old method, an old analytics method, for example, and that if that's been deprecated, then you definitely need to update that. And finally, something that we used to see many years ago, being old as I am, the iframes. Iframes seem to be coming back, and as a result, we do sometimes see that the tag is included in an iframe, which is not really a positive way of tracking. So I guess activity 2, if you want to identify what's happening with your website, would be to install the Google Tag Assistant as a Chrome extension and check for any issues. Of course, you can do that on any website, so you can have a sneaky peek at your competitors if you really wanted to. Okay, so then the next method of tracking, making tracking checks, is to use the Facebook Pixel Helper. Now, if you're using Facebook and you're using advertising, then you definitely want the Pixel on there. And again, you can download the Pixel Helper as a Chrome extension. Again, it's free. Some examples of issues, we often find multiple pixels firing. As you can see in this screenshot, there's actually 3 pixels, and they're all firing on the website. This doesn't break the tracking, but there's usually no need for this, and it's just extra code on your website. We also see inaccurate or incorrect events firing. For example, we may visit the contact page and see a form submission event fire. That tells us that the form tracking is firing too early, and we'll definitely be over-reporting. We sometimes see that the pixel isn't loading or hasn't loaded correctly, and that's a code implementation problem. And finally, we might even see an invalid pixel ID from time to time. Again, this is an error due to the code implementation. So activity 3 would be to download the Facebook Pixel Tracker, Pixel Helper, and just see if you've got any issues with any tracking that you've got on your website. So as I said before, we recommend using Google Tag Manager as the preferred method for tracking on your website So Google Analytics effectively provides the reporting then. And the reason we recommended this, and to be honest, I've recommended it for probably 4 years now, is that by using Tag Manager, because it's one piece of code on your website, and it allows you to deploy all of your other tracking code through Google Tag Manager rather than putting it on your website, then it speeds up the tracking process. So you don't need to go to your web developer every time you want to add a new tracking code. You can do it through Google Tag Manager. Although, to be fair, if you wanted us to do that, then we would do that part for you anyway. It's got some great debugging features, so it's very easy to understand why tracking might not be working and get it sorted. You have version control, which allows you to always see what changes have been made and when a particular piece of tracking was either added or stopped. So that's obviously very useful. And there are some pre-prepared tags making it really much easier for people to implement the tracking. I'll be honest with you, it's probably better if you got someone like Key Principles to implement Google Tag Manager for you if you're only going to be doing it for your own website, because there is quite a steep learning curve, but it is something that we offer as a service. And as I say, I wrote a blog way back in 2016, so yeah, it was 4 years ago, about what Google Tag Manager is and why it's the way forward when you're looking at tracking on your website. Okay, so just quickly going into Google Analytics. First thing to understand is the levels within Google Analytics. So we generally recommend that you have one account per business, which is different actually to Google Ads, where we would recommend a slightly different approach. With each website that you have, so if you have more than one website, then you have one property per website. And then finally, you have view level. And at the view level, that's where you have the reporting. For example, you have a view that includes all data, and then you might have a view that excludes all of your employees' website hits. So that's where you exclude the IP addresses of your employees. And that's definitely worth doing if if you're starting to build a number of employees up and they're all going to your website. You want to be able to exclude those visits from the data. Okay, so just checking settings at each level. This is a video that Malik prepared earlier, so I'll be voicing over for some videos that Malik's done. But at account level, it's quite straightforward. You just choose the country and accept the agreements. Obviously, you have to accept the agreements if you want to use Google's free tools, which it makes sense to do, to be fair. At the property level, I think we have the little video. So you add in, obviously, your property name, so your company name. You add in your website address, either with or without www. Make sure that the HTTPS is on. You must be secure now. He's gone through this very quickly. So you can see here all the different elements that he's recommending we adjust. And obviously adding Search Console is a very important element. But that is a very quick scoot through at that level, the sort of things that you need to be aware of. So we've pretty much switched things on, and we would recommend that you adjust Search Console as well, so that Search Console is actually linked to your Google Analytics, and then you can see the Search Console data in your Google Analytics, which obviously is helpful. The next level is the view level, and again we have a quick video here. At the view level, you're going for all website visitors, you're checking the URLs correct, you're making sure time zone and time is correct, country zone and time is correct. Adjust the currency if you need to, make the adjustment there. And quite an important one, if you've got site search on, then make sure that you add tracking for site search. And if you've got a WordPress website, then you just need to add the S, which is quite straightforward, and tick the box. And if you're wondering why that's the case, if you go and do a search on your website, you'll see that there'll be a question mark S at the beginning of the search URL, and that pretty much allows you with WordPress websites to track your site search. Quite clever little piece of information there. So activity 4 would be to check your tracking in Google Analytics, check the settings and adjust them as needed. If you're a client of ours, then you can be pretty sure that the tracking will be perfect, so you won't really be needing to do this part. Okay, so the next step, so Google Analytics tracking checks, what are you tracking? So once we start looking at the actual reports in Google Analytics, there's a number of reports that we want to be making sure are working. Obviously, the first one is that sessions are being tracked. So sessions are basically the number of visitors that you're getting to your website. And as you can see in this screenshot, we've got an example of the number of visitors, and you can see the sessions there, and then the number of sessions per user and page views. So you just want to make sure that that's working. Probably something that is a bit of a bugbear for me is the fact that people will often set up Google Analytics and they won't actually set up goal conversions or events. And really, just knowing what the number of people that have visited your website isn't that helpful. Even knowing the number of people that visited your website and the source isn't that helpful. What you really need to know is, how many people have actually performed an action on my website that is important to me. And then following on from that, I guess, how many people have and where have those people come from? So this is why conversion tracking is so important. So you've got goals and then you've got events. And events we often use for sort of smaller goals. You can see in here we've got phone call tracking. And the reason that will be in there, well, there'll be two reasons potentially. One is likely that this particular client has phone call tracking. The other reason it might be in there is that this client is actually using Google Ads. As I say, those are the only two ways really of monitoring phone calls. Whatever phone call tracking system you use, I'd recommend that you make sure that it is easily integrated with Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager. Okay, and finally, yeah, the most important one for me, and hopefully for anybody that's interested in working out what marketing activity is actually generating the sales and the inquiries, and that is source. So you can go to source in Google Analytics and look at where you're getting your visitors from, and also where you're getting your conversions from. And as you can see here, the Google Organic for this particular client is very, very big. For some reason, there is the massive increase in other. My guess on this one is it's most likely going to be email marketing, something that I believe is crucial to any business. So in this instance, the tracking, that's most likely going to be what it is, certainly with those conversion rates. Okay, so what extra do you need to track based on activity 1? So if you think through, if you go back to activity 1, look at your website and what you suggested you needed tracking, you can now go back and you can now go into Google Analytics and say, actually, has that been tracked? Am I tracking everything I really want to track? And if not, you can add more tracking. I would certainly consider moving to Google Tag Manager if you haven't done that already. And there's activity number 5. So check what you're tracking and add more tracking as needed. Really important that you do that. I would also like to sort of highlight at this point that any clients on the webinar today, if we've completed the tracking for you, and you make any updates to your website or changes, that then would require us to track, then please make us aware of that as soon as or even before you make the changes, so that we can make sure that we're tracking everything on the website. Okay, so yeah, the missing link, it's a big one. So yeah, call tracking. Basically, you know, if you've got a large percentage of your inquiries coming through by phone call, then this is a massive missing link in the business. So are phone calls being tracked? And if they are, do they need, does the tracking software need to link to Google Analytics? That can often be quite a straightforward process to do. As I say, there is the free call tracking with Google Ads, but you have to pay to run Google Ads, and it only relates to Google Ads traffic. So if you're getting a high proportion of your calls, of your inquiries using through phone calls, then I would highly recommend that you start looking at call tracking. We do have a preferred supplier for call tracking, and for any of you that's interested in looking at call tracking in more details, then we can do that. But yeah, a paid for solution is probably the best way to go. And as I say, we can integrate that for you. So activity number 6 would be to decide whether or not you need to implement call tracking. I would say, you know, if you're getting more than half of your inquiries from calls, you really do need to be looking at it. Okay, so that's the missing link, call tracking, and it can be a very big missing link. Okay, so just going on to sort of metrics and how you as a business look at the activity that you're doing. I came across this particular system. It's called the 5 Ways. It's actually a system developed by Brad Sugars of Action Coach, and I thought I would share this with you because it's quite interesting. So in the table we have things that are marked in orange and things that are marked in green, as you can see. We actually want to measure and monitor the green elements because those are the elements that are under our control. Everybody looks at and measures the orange metrics, but that's not really, that's the output of the green metrics, which is actually the input. So maybe I'm not explaining this very well, but basically the orange metrics are simply the outputs of the green ones. So for example, the top row, we don't have control over the number of customers we have. Well, however, we do have control of the number of leads that we can generate through our marketing activity. We do have some control over the conversion rate. So it's those 2 elements that we need to focus on to actually improve our marketing. And then the outcome is the customers. So I hope you can appreciate what I'm saying here, because it's the same really at any level. So if you take an overview at a business level, you can see it. And if you take it at a very small campaign level, so a Google Ads campaign, you can see it as well. So this is why it's important. So as I say, there are of course different versions of this, but this is the one that we sort of wanted to follow. So basically, lead time conversion rate gives you the number of customers. Then the customers, if you can increase the number of transactions that a customer has and or the average sale value, then you can increase your revenue. If you can increase your margin, then you can increase your profit. So it's actually looking at it and thinking about the figures that you actually need to monitor as a business owner, rather than just looking at customers and revenue and profit. So I hope that sort of makes sense. So as I say, measure what is in green because the orange is the output of green. And the green metrics are the 5 areas we can improve to grow our business. So it's a very clever approach. I think it works really well. And obviously, I'm hoping that you appreciate the importance of it. So when we talk about metrics, then, if we look at it a stage further ahead, the important metrics then are the outputs. No, they're not. They're the inputs. So important metrics are the outputs, but not so important as the inputs. So the ones that I've got here are case numbers or revenue, if you like, inquiry numbers and users. So don't compare, one thing to say is don't compare two shorter time periods. So if you're in Google Analytics and you're looking at various time periods, don't go for just the last week, go for the last month, or to be honest, even the last quarter. And of course, in a situation like we're in most currently, we're probably better looking at quarter on quarter, but also year on year. And obviously the most recent metrics are going to be quite unusual, shall we say. So yeah, please don't look at it too close a time period. So these are the outputs, and we need to measure the inputs, which is what I actually consider to be the most important. So the inputs are the number of leads, so the number of goal completions in Google Analytics, for example, the number of leads to case conversion rates, or in most people's cases, revenue or conversion rates, visitor to inquiry conversion rate. So for website inquiries, what is your conversion rate on visitors to website conversions? And then finally, the activity to increase visitors and or increase lead numbers. So the ways that we can look to improve and increase the visitor numbers and hopefully the leads and sales. Obviously SEO, a big one, a service that we offer, paid advertising, email marketing, and obviously there's plenty of other activities that we can look at, networking, and lots of other things that you can look at. So the next activity really is to check what you're reporting on and make sure that the inputs are as important as the outputs when you start reporting, or when you look to adjust your reporting. Okay, so just a quick little discussion about Google Data Studio. So many of us have a little bit of an understanding of Google Analytics, but Google Data Studio is another way of reporting. It is a free tool available from Google, and it allows you to, well, it enables you not to have to dig into the Google Analytics data and work your way around that system. Although, just to be honest with you, you can do that and you can have a good look around Google Analytics because you'll not break anything. It's simply a reporting system. So with Google Data Studio, though, you do have it's pretty much a one-time setup. So once it's set up, it's there and available to you 24/7. It's easy to share between teams. So if you've got a number of people in your team, then you can easily share it with them. And here's an example of one that we've created for a client. And as you can see on the slide, you've got an overview of really what's happening on your website. So the number of users, the visits, the new users, the pages per session. You've got the channels that those visitors have come from. So you can see here, we've got organic, direct, referral, paid search, social, and email. Interestingly, you can also see the leads, which is obviously crucial to any business. And then we also provide a breakdown of the leads, as you can see in the graph below and that in the chart at the bottom. And that can be broken down further if needed, but it gives you an idea of exactly what source the lead came from and also what type of request it was. So you can see there we've got downloads, contacts, clicks, and the request is request to call back. So you can see a breakdown there. That's an overview. We actually provide data across a whole range of different elements, so that's useful to know. And then finally, the measuring ROI. So this is a bit mind-blowing and probably worth taking a look at in the recording that I'll send to you guys. But here's an example of an ROI calculator we used for a client at Key Principles. This particular example is for Google Ads, but it can be adapted for Facebook advertising or even the whole of a business. So the interesting thing is we've included some WordStream benchmarks here. So we often do that for Google Ads because WordStream have a great deal of data on Google Ads. And then what we do as well is we include an average lifetime value because sometimes an ROI might take a while to come through. So the average lifetime value of a client is important to know if you want to really get to grips with return on investment and calculating that for the different marketing activities that you're performing. If you want to have a chat about measuring ROI offline, then certainly we can do that. Just email me and we can start working on how we improve, how we can start measuring the ROI for you and your business. So activity number eight, would be to measure ROI by campaign and by activity. And then finally, conclusion, track actions on your website and ensure that the tracking is working correctly. That will enable you to make the most informed decisions you can with regard to the activity that's really working for you. Reporting. On the reporting, note the most important metrics, and remember to monitor inputs as well as outputs, as it's the inputs that you have control over. Finally, sanity check your marketing efforts. Run these through the ROI calculator. To say, if you want me to look at more detail at that, we can, because you want to make sure that you're making a positive return on the activities that you're undertaking. Okay, so a quick conclusion. Obviously, we've got the activities here that potentially you might need to be looking at, particularly if we haven't looked at your tracking for you. And I guess this is it. We're at the end. I seem to run through that one quite quickly. Let's just see if we've got any questions. I don't think we have any, unless there's any now. No questions? Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed the webinar. What I would ask actually is, this webinar I put together, but I really need your help to know what webinars you'd really like us to be looking at. So please do let me have some feedback, good or bad. I prefer to have it. We want to try and make these webinars as useful as we can for you guys. I've got some ideas myself, but I don't really want to be forcing ideas upon you. One thing I would say though is thank you for your time, and the next webinar will be the third Wednesday of next month at 3 p.m. And yeah, please get in touch with some ideas in terms of other topics. I've got a couple of ideas here, as you can see, or a few ideas here, as you can see. But I really need your input to actually be able to make these webinars as worthwhile as I possibly can for the community. So your feedback would be very much appreciated. Okay, thank you very much for your time, everyone, and hopefully see you on the next webinar. Thank you.